Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today, Electrify 101. I'm Joe Wachunas with Electrify Now, here as usual this week with Wesley Allen at Electrify Now. We'll introduce our panelists in just a second, but great to have you with us for the fourth event of our Clean Air Week. And speaking of Clean Air Weeks, Wesley, why don't you tell us a little bit about what we are doing this week?
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, the purpose of Clean Air Week is to really highlight the dangers of burning natural or fossil gas indoors. So this week we've had a host of webinars highlighting the health risks of fossil gas, providing practical resources to improve indoor air quality, which is really going to be a focus of today's webinar. Bringing together different advocates of clean air from around the nation who are working on these really important issues and supporting their work as we can. All right. So we've had a lot of great events already this week. Today we're going to be focusing on Electrification 101, and Joe's going to explain a little bit more about today's topic in a second. We have one final virtual event tomorrow that we're calling the Decarb Policy Panel or Decarbonization Policy Panel. And it's going to be a really wonderful panel of about 6 experts from around the country from various organizations who are working on these issues, and will provide updates on some of the new policies or strategies that advocates are using around the country to clean indoor air. And then lastly, if you're in Portland, Oregon, we also have a live event, Home Electrification Fair. So we put the link there, and also we'll put these in the chat. So come join us if you're in Portland, Oregon, or the Northwest. We also have a bunch of shareable graphics on our website. So I put the URL there, and we have some fact sheets on the different pollutants in fossil or natural gas that you can download and feel free to use as you'd like. We also have some other graphics that are kind of provocative, make you think a little bit. Feel free to use those too, along with some other handouts and fact sheets for your use. And lastly, this one has been really fun. We created a natural or fossil gas quit line. So we have this number here that you can call 1-877-QUIT-GAS if you're ready to transition off of natural gas. So whether you're just starting your electrification journey or you're kind of stuck midway, feel free to give this number a call, leave a voicemail, and electrification experts will get back to you with resources or some tips and tricks on problem solving what you're thinking about. Back to you, Joe.
I'm muted. This week we've been talking a lot about some of the dangers of combusting fuels in our homes. We looked at air quality issues and health issues. We looked at ways to potentially clean your air with home filtration and ways to monitor your air with home air quality monitors. Today we're going to look into how we can get rid of all combusting appliances in our home. What does that process look like? And so we're going to do a dive into Electrification 101. We're going to talk about where do we start? What has the biggest impact? What can you do if you're a renter or a homeowner? What resources are out there? There are lots. A lot of folks are making it as easy as possible for electrification. How appliance electrification can really help reduce those healthcare costs when we're looking at our nation as a whole, and what are all these economic and climate benefits of electrification that a lot of times we don't think about. So we have some great panelists to talk about these today. So let me introduce our panelists here, switching screen. So first off, we're going to hear from Ted Tiffany from the Building Decarbonization Coalition. He focuses on the technical support of decarbonizing buildings from policy development through technology innovation and resources to advancing building science. Before Ted joined BDC, he worked as at a top-level engineering firm focusing on building electrification design. hospitals, houses, and he focused on especially technically challenging buildings. His work in building performance modeling, sustainability consulting, renewable energy, and microgrid planning set the groundwork for his expertise in energy policy. So super excited to have Ted kick us off with let's just Electrification 101. And then we'll be hearing from Wael Kanj, Senior Research Associate at Rewiring America. He performs quantitative analysis and leads original research to drive adoption of electric appliances. He supports both local and national advocacy work, and he works with a lot of organizations as technical support. He's been featured in awesome publications like the New York Times, The Guardian, Canary Media, and MIT Technology Review. And Wael will be talking about a lot of his research on what electrification does for health outcomes nationwide. So excited to hear both of these awesome presentations. So we'll turn it over to Ted first. Ted, feel free to take control and start sharing. And yeah, thanks so much for being with us.
Will do. Just confirm that came up and you can all see my screen.
Yeah, looks great.
All right. So again, I'm Ted Tiffany with the Building Decarbonization Coalition. I'm our senior technical lead, which just really means I have to answer all the tough questions. But BDC is a nonprofit organization, and our entire existence is really just to create market transformation for heat pumps and healthy electrification. Our coalition is really members of manufacturers, utilities, local governments, and we do a lot of policy work, advocacy work, boots on the grounds with contractors and consumers. And I'm going to share a little bit of our transition strategies here today. My background is in building engineering. I spent the last 20 years really helping the design community, codes and policies and standards really change towards electrification and understanding different strategies behind building electrification and the importance of doing that for not only grid benefits, but health and air quality and impacts to office workers, cooks, chefs in the kitchen, and including your home. I have actually electrified my home, and I want to help you guys get the all-electric home of your dreams. But that comes with some strategy. I electrified my home during the pandemic at a time when we were transitioning what home meant. A lot of us transitioned into office environments in our homes, changed the use and strategy and comfort conditions of our homes, and at a time where appliance scarcity was a real thing. It took us time to get electrified equipment. Labor was hard. The decarbonization transition was just happening, but I'm going to share with you kind of the strategies that we utilize and we're still talking about with different homeowners through our Switches On campaign and different contractor engagement strategies we've had. We're really learning a lot through the process. And I kind of want to share a couple of those things, but I want to remind you when you're making an electrification plan for your home, just start with the basics. What does your existing home needs? Have you done any air sealing? Air sealing and going around, I'll say, even with something as simple as an incense stick through a windy day like today here I have in my county, you can identify all those air leaks really quickly and start to get really cheap. Caulking, air sealing, and going around with a caulking gun is really easy around the window vents. Seasonal things like storm windows. Those are really easy fixes that can really solve a lot of the comfort issues. And then you start to evolve the plan into, okay, what's the oldest appliance? What's the one that's really gonna maybe break on me next? What's the electrification strategy around that furnace? What's the electrification strategy around that water heater? What's my next step with induction cooking? Do I have a gas stove? Is that going to be a discussion point between my family members who are really tied to gas cooking? There's a lot of discussions that need to happen in your household, and making a plan is the first effort there. and eventually getting into rooftop solar and perhaps battery storage to provide your home some resiliency. I think as you've done the right sizing and getting all of the air sealing done, you've done really low watt appliances, you can start to talk about right sizing your solar and battery storage systems for home resiliency. And I always say that's usually the last and most expensive thing you invest in. So that's the plan I want to walk you through today. And let's just start with heat pumps. Space conditioning comes in many different flavors. What we've got here on the screen is a ductless heat pump. It's kind of a wall-mounted application. These are zonally controlled. That's an option for you. It comes with visual impacts, right? So this is a wall-hung unit. It's going to be like a new piece of art on your wall, but these come in very different sizes. I know one manufacturer that has the heat pump hidden behind a virtual art wall that you really don't see, but it's still considered a ductless unit. For my household, I really wanted to work with my 1917 classic Craftsman home to really not have a visual impact like this of a ductless wall-mounted heat pump. So I went to a ducted version. The outdoor unit for that, very similar, right? Very slim application. The boxy air conditioning units of old are getting slimmer and smaller and getting quieter. So, in HOA events where you have, things like auditory impacts to neighbors, setback requirements, these are becoming much more versatile. And the condenser units can be very large or small. When I talked about getting load sizing down, you get the loads down in your house with better insulation, better windows, air sealing. You can start to shrink the machines and your cost of installing a heat pump. But the location matters. So we'll talk about a couple of different options in space conditioning systems. So in my household, I have this outdoor condenser in my driveway right next to where I park my cars. It's really no impact to my living situation or where my cars park. I found a really nice convenient space for it. And now my air handler's in my attic. I actually gained square footage in my house by removing the furnace closet. So the spatial issues will come into play. Oh, there we go. So for small apartment spaces, convenient things like these Epica units are wall mounted directly through the wall and 120 volt options. So this is a very convenient, sleek, modern heat pump that has very little installation requirements. This is not the PTAC of old, like the wall shakers we used to call them, that create an entire cavity that need to be inserted. These are now 6 and 8 inch holes for a supply and return and a simple plug-in version. So these things come in all shape and sizes. You can, say, in a 3-bedroom apartment, probably utilize 2 of these to do space conditioning now with very little impacts. Gradient makes another over-the-window plug-in heat pump now that's being used in New York for a lot of apartment retrofits without really having to do that retrofit impact on the larger building systems. So height heat pumps are working in any climate now. So the invention of cold climate heat pumps within the last 5 years have really changed the game for performance in cold climates. They maintain capacity, full capacity at -5 degrees. And many of these maintain temperatures down to -17. Ground source heat pumps work in any climate. So if you're looking at really extreme environments, Canadians love our ground source heat pump. We're really looking at networked geothermal systems, thermal energy networks, we call them, where we can connect waste heat from, say, a data center to feed a geothermal unit. But heat pumps can work in any climate at this point. So let's talk about water heating. Water heating, changing out a gas water heater. I sat with Panama's as the director of the Building Decarbonization Coalition in 2017, looking at space, form, power functions with the manufacturers. And the manufacturers responded brilliantly to this need. We needed a lower power connection. We needed to solve the electrical issues. And Rheem and the other manufacturers, this is a picture of the Rheem unit, brought us a high performance plug-in 120-volt water heater that fit a slim closet. And that's what the industry needed. The manufacturers delivered. So this is a very convenient installation for the plumbers now. They don't really have to do any hardwired applications. Very easy to install unit. So we do have 120-volt options. We also have hardwired 240 and ones with electric resistance backup, but you don't need that high-powered version. I get along fine with my 120-volt in my household. Heat pump water heaters have come out with a lot of split versions now. There are a couple more coming to market, but the Sanco 2 is a split unit. This remote condenser can be located anywhere. It can be located on the outside of the house. It can be located in a remote garage if you're in multifamily. And the tanks can be placed inside without any sound, ventilation issues, and remote located. The best thing about this Sandin product, I'll say right now, it's using a refrigerant that has a global warming potential of just 1. It's a CO2-based refrigerant that can produce a lot more hot water in a remote location and solve a lot of those technical issues. So I have one of these for my small grading unit, which had space issues and sound issues in the small spaces. So 450 square feet. The condenser is now outside of the living space, so that sound and cool that it produces is no longer affecting the interior environments. This particular one is located in a basement, but this can be remote located in a lot of different configurations. Heat pumps are coming in all shapes and sizes now. We used to only have heat pumps in our refrigerator, a one-way heat pump we like to call it. Now heat pumps are doing the work in washing machines as well. So this is an example of a heat pump combo washer. You can also get heat pumps that just do drying, but this is a really convenient option for retrofits because it is a 120-volt option. It's ventless, and it washes and dries your clothes with one appliance. Now you're buying just one appliance. So I have one of these in my small space requirements for my accessory dwelling unit where my kids live. And now they've got their own laundry machine. But I didn't have to duct it out. I didn't have to hardwire a 240-volt application like most of our electric dryers did. And a really easy install. Induction cooking is kind of the key we call to the electric kitchens because we have so much discussion about gas cooking. This is usually the hardest appliance to make a justification for because people have been trained to cook on gas. Commercial cooking is cooking on gas. But what a lot of people don't know is some of the original chefluencers cooking on gas were provided gas kitchens so that they could promote gas. It wasn't necessarily for the benefit of cooking. So what we like to say is induction cooktops are a better cooking experience. They don't heat the space up. They're safer kitchens. I don't have the risk of a grease fire in my kitchen anymore because there's no active flame. I tried to do a flambe the other night and I had to actually try to go find a lighter so I could light the liqueur on top of that flambe. And I had to scramble to find it. So much safer kitchens, much cooler kitchens. And I'll tell you what, best thing I love is I use glass cleaner to clean this. I no longer have to take those grills out and really clean underneath the stove. Options for renters. So if you've got a gas stove in your rental apartment, these hobs, I have a double burner hob that I got for less than $200 that I still use on my barbecue outside now and replaces any of the propane that I used to use for side cooking. But I've lent this to my neighbors to just try out induction cooking. It works with any pots and pans that are magnetic. So just try it out with a magnetic. I cook on all cast iron. I can cook a roast on a Dutch oven on top of this portable stove. And as a renter, once you buy this appliance, you can take it to your next department. Same thing with heat pumps. Next thing I'm working on is a combi oven countertop application that will allow me to do. I have one I'm looking at. It is both a microwave, air fryer, an oven, a toaster, and this is all within a $300 appliance budget for that single one. So I could have, frankly, got rid of my induction range instead of and in place of doing a countertop induction and a separate ombre oven to save space. So we are on an active campaign to train chefluencers. And we know cooking is culture. We understand that we have to address the different ways in each of our families that we cook food. And induction can address that. We had a lot of discussion whether or not you could cook on an induction wok the same meal with the wok. And we brought in Chef Martin Yan to kind of prove that could be done on an induction wok. And he's been doing a lot of great work for us, sharing the message of how to change your cooking habits on induction. It doesn't change the flavor of food, it just changes the process. And so as we get more professional chefs and even chef ambassadors in our neighborhoods to really just share this message, we're getting a lot of great uptake of induction stove use. And in fact, we're at this point of where induction stoves are becoming one of the more popular appliance choice in kitchen renovations. And I can show you some of the consumer reports on that now. Induction is hot. So the last thing I want to address is the panel upgrade challenge. And this is one of the other barriers that we face is, well, if we electrify everything, we're going to break the grid, right? That's really a false assumption here. I went and talked about a lot of the 120 volt appliances, the plug-in versions. There are a ton of low watt applications that we can utilize in our electrification plan that doesn't require panel upgrades or service upgrades. We've got things like switching devices. So I can plug in now in my electric dryer plug, that is the 240 volt application, a switching device that'll allow me to do car charging without changing the electrical infrastructure. We've got things like smart panels and other load sharing devices that can utilize the service at 100 amps in a typical home, but share loads at different times of application. So I don't need to do water heating when I'm doing electric drying. I can delay that water heating and utilize that same home infrastructure. So we like to call it the watt diet or power efficient design. And we're starting to do a lot more education around how to do that for electricians. And we've just made changes to the National Electric Code to make this much easier for plan check agencies to understand, but electricians to do the calculations to keep you under your service size so we don't have that huge impact on the grid or huge impact to your electrification plan with big time delays, large costs for service upgrades with your utility providers. Those can be, if we don't do that thoughtfully, that can be some of the larger costs you would face. And frankly, we want to be creating electrified homes that are grid assets now instead of grid liabilities. So I want to encourage you guys to go to the switcheson.org. We've got a lot of resources there, as well as the Building Decarbonization Coalition website. So buildingdecarb.org. We have a ton of research policy papers on buildingdecarb.org. Switcheson.org is really more consumer facing. So how do you find incentives in the regions we're serving there? You can find how to get connected to contractors. Our contractor finder is there in the regions where we're established. So visit switcheson.org and let's help you get on your pathway to your electric home of your dreams. So with that, I think I'm going to pass it on to Will.
Great. Thanks a lot, Ted. Yeah, always great to hear from someone who's an expert in all of the sort of technical details of electrification. So share my screen as well. Just confirmation, verbal confirmation, folks can see this.
Looks great.
Awesome, thanks. So hi everyone. My name is Wael Kanj and I'm a research manager at Rewiring America. And today I'm going to be talking about Breathe Easy, which is sort of our name for our work quantifying the health impacts of electrification through improved outdoor air quality. And I'm really happy to be here alongside Ted, and thank you to the folks from Electrify now for having me. So I'll give a brief overview of Rewiring America and our background, as well as why we care about and how we think about home electrification. That'll transition into why electrification matters for outdoor air quality and therefore health. I'll highlight some modeling that we did on the impacts of electrification on community health outcomes. And then finally, I'll walk through some of the tools and resources we've created that I think are sort of just additional options to the ones that Ted shared as well. So we are a national nonprofit focused on residential building electrification. So for the last few years, we've been working on transforming the U.S. energy system by shaping electrification policy, aggregating demand for heat pumps and other electric appliances at a local level, and partnering with industry to make electrification the norm for every household. When we talk about electrification, sort of just a refresher from what Ted just described, but we're talking about replacing machines in homes that currently burn things like gas, so like a gas furnace, replacing that with a heat pump, or a gas water heater with a heat pump water heater. And once that machine is running on electricity, it means that that electricity is produced with clean, renewable energy. And we're sort of doing all of this because of this number, which comes out of the research that our co-founder, Saul Griffith, did that led to our founding. And it was this finding that 42% of energy-related emissions in the US come from these household decisions around what kind of car we're driving, how we heat and cool our home and water, how we dry our clothes, cook our food, and the energy we use to power all of that. So that number really defines personal leverage and guides our strategy, because it's a lot of power in the seemingly smaller everyday decisions that households are making every single day. And not only does smart electrification decrease greenhouse gas emissions, but if we all do this right, we get a better, cleaner, safer and healthier and more beautiful world. And so I'll spend a lot of today digging in on that sort of healthier part and understand how electrification actually impacts outdoor air quality. So they want to emphasize that the focus of our research and modeling was on the impacts of electrification on outdoor air quality. If you attended the webinar earlier this week, I think you got a great deep dive into how electrification and burning fossil fuels inside the home impacts health. And that sort of a lot of that research was actually sort of the impetus for us doing this research on outdoor air quality, but really felt like there was a gap in the research on outdoor air quality. And so we wanted to focus on outdoor air quality because focusing only on indoor wouldn't fully capture the health impacts of upgrading larger appliances like heat pumps and heat pump water heaters, which ventilate outside. And upgrading those larger appliances have the biggest impact in terms of emissions reductions and bill savings when switching to efficient electric versions. So we sort of wanted to make sure that, as we talk about these sort of like big actions you can take, like installing a heat pump, alongside, being very upfront or telling folks about how much money they could save or the climate benefits, we also wanted to include the health benefits as well. And so we have to ensure that our modeling sort of captured the two primary ways that home appliances can impact outdoor air quality. So it's burning fossil fuels at home, like from a furnace like you're seeing on the left, as well as burning fossil fuels at power plants to generate electricity. And so our modeling accounts for both of these. And the mechanism is that, sort of there's two things going on here, right? So at the home, burning fossil fuels at home is, when you're burning fossil fuels for space heating or water heating or clothes drying, any of those appliances that burn things like gas or propane or delivered fuels, those appliances vent to the outdoors. And so along with that ventilation are air pollutants like volatile organic compounds, sulfur dioxide, ammonia, and others that we sort of call PM 2.5 precursors, or it's very, very minuscule air pollutants, which have a range of really negative health outcomes. So they could lead to asthma attacks, increased risks of heart failure, lung cancer, and premature mortality or early death. And so as those air pollutants are emitted outside from appliances, those sort of concentrate in the air, they blow, maybe many miles away. And when you breathe those in, it contributes to a host of negative health effects. But there's also, when you're consuming electricity at home, there's also potential health impacts from that as well. So on the bottom, you sort of see using electricity for things like space heating and water heating as well. That electricity has to come from somewhere, and power plants will emit air pollutants when they burn fossil fuels to create that electricity. Those, also travel and concentrate in the air and then lead to health impacts. And so those are sort of the two primary mechanisms we were capturing in our modeling. And then I'll sort of talk about how we model those impacts as well. So we primarily used building energy modeling, which was compiled by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, which is such a data set representing the entire housing stock of the US. And on top of that, so we sort of have a data set representing all of the households. And on top of that, we modeled what would happen if you replace the current appliances in homes with these efficient electric versions. So if we replaced all of the furnaces or fossil fuel burning appliances with the heat pump versions. And because this data represents the actual housing stock, it sort of represents the actual mix of housing sizes and occupants and weather and different fuels that are used around the whole country in different states. And so from that analysis, we could get things like, if you swap out a furnace in a given state, how much less natural gas is that household using, and how much electricity is that then using? And we layered modeling on top of that, tying fuel consumption and electricity consumption to those air pollutants, and then put those values through a essentially open source air transport pollution model that models how that pollution would travel to different households and the health impacts it then has. There's a lot more details here that I'm happy to chat with folks, be afterwards, or feel free to send me an email, and I can talk more about our sort of modeling approach here. But I think it's important to call out this research was all sort of modeled research. It wasn't based on, the sort of background data was based on some observed research, but the research we did was modeled research on these data sets and not actually sort of air quality modeling or air quality monitoring that we performed. But we wanted to see, okay, what if we simulated putting a heat pump water heater, and heat pump dryer in every home around the country, swapping out existing appliances? And the impacts are pretty big. So, because we're no longer burning fossil fuels at home, we estimated that we could reduce, if we did all these upgrades, we could reduce outdoor air pollution by about 300,000 tons per year. That's similar to about 40 million cars based on total PM 2.5 and its precursors. And fully electrifying those three home appliances would result in about 3,400 fewer premature or early deaths each year, thanks to that reduced outdoor air pollution. And all that's valued at around $40 billion. And so these are really big impacts, and it doesn't even include the hundreds of dollars, on average per year that households could see in bill savings from these electric upgrades, as well as, any value associated with the greenhouse gas emissions, which is also substantial. And so that's the national totals, but I think another reason our analysis was powerful is because we built it on top of really highly granular data. So it takes into account local health and mortality rates in assessing the impact of air pollutants in different places. It takes into account the difference in energy impacts from electrification through different household characteristics. So in certain areas that might have larger homes, those might have larger impacts than smaller homes electrified in terms of the total health impacts. We're taking into account the present and projected future emissions of the electricity grid in terms of which fuels are powering it. And we're using local climate and geography as well as population density in the energy usage and air modeling work. So again, there's a lot of details here I won't fully delve into today, but happy to chat further about the details of our analysis here. And so because we're using that database and building our modeling on top of it, again, we can sort of see what are the disparate impacts around the country, and how does that vary by different geography? So what you can see here is the average annual health impact of installing a heat pump in a single family household, normalized for the number of households electrified. So essentially what this is saying is that in some states like New York and Pennsylvania and New Jersey, each heat pump that we swap in, every heat pump we swap into homes, replacing the existing appliances, could lead to between $500 and $750 per year in health benefits for the country. And so you can see how these numbers quickly add up to that 40 billion I was talking about on the earlier slide. And so we can sort of see some interesting patterns emerge if we zoom in to different parts of the country. So electrifying homes, in the mid-Atlantic and Northeast, where heating needs are generally higher and where there's relatively sort of cleaner grids that are projected to get cleaner over the next 15 years, and there's high population density, means that all those sort of factors contribute together to have higher positive impacts, relative to other places. And then in places like Florida, the impacts are relatively smaller, just because most homes there already use electricity, and the overall heating load is obviously a lot lower in Florida than it is in other states. So there's still a positive impact, because when you replace an inefficient electric resistance heating or inefficient AC with a heat pump, you're using a lot less electricity, and so less electricity needs to be generated. Power plants will emit less pollutants, and there will be health benefits, but it is just relatively smaller. And then, in places like Maine, there are, high heating load, but there's relatively lower population densities, or pollutants might not travel as much to higher population areas. And so there's sort of correspondingly a slightly lower positive health impact from converting to electric appliances. But I sort of mentioned the sort of another sort of way that these health impacts can vary is by the type of original fuel used in the appliance before it's swapped out with a heat pump version. And so you can sort of see here, splitting out these numbers by the type of fuel. Retrofitting homes heated with things like delivered fuel oil or methane gas can lead to higher health savings, because these heating systems are more polluting. And in the case of natural gas, a lot of these are in very highly populated areas. So places like New York and New Jersey, where each pollutant emitted outdoors has a high impact because there's so many people around to breathe in those pollutants. So what does this mean for electrification? I think, some of the ways we envisioned this work being used are really just to strengthen the narrative around the benefits of electrification programs at all levels of government, as well as for states or local communities. So, for example, if there's a heat pump incentive program targeting low-income households in North Carolina, we could use this analysis and actually model that this would unlock around $110 million each year in national health benefits. And so, one of our primary motivations was to, encourage incorporating things like health benefits into cost benefit analyses. And I think with the granularity of data, we can definitely enable more of that. And, not only the health impacts, but also the overall emissions impacts as well, in terms of quantifying outdoor air pollution. So I showed a couple sort of cuts here, but We also made all of this data available in a couple different ways for free. And so the first on the left, we have an aggregated Tableau dashboard where you can go in and sort of view the summarized results for different upgrades, slice and dice the data in different ways. And then on the right, for folks who are like developers or data scientists, we also created an API where you can sort of automate some data analysis, pull more of this data into other dashboards, and sum up different sort of sub-segments of households to your heart's content. And so we're really excited about making these things available to really just empower advocates and other organizations doing this work. So that's all I had for the health and outdoor air quality impacts work, but I did want to make sure to highlight those other electrification tools and resources that we created that are really geared towards households who want to electrify their homes now. So if you go to our website, you can go to rewiringamerica.org or homes.rewiringamerica.org. You can access all the resources in one place. So if you're wondering, which incentives like rebates or tax credits you're eligible for based on where you live, you can plug in a couple pieces of information, use our savings calculator to do that. We also launched a tool called the Personal Electrification Planner, which actually walks you through step by step with just some details about your home, how to sort of go through that journey that Ted actually laid out on the things to do first, what to do next, and based on your home's characteristics, and actually will provide some information or some estimates on how much money you might save with different upgrades or the overall environmental impacts from that. You can also find guides for finding contractors and answers to FAQs. And then, of course, I'm sure you've probably heard, federal tax credits for lots of these electric appliances are fortunately expiring at the end of this year. And so there are millions of households that could really save a lot of money or benefit from these tax credits for both electric appliances as well as things like air sealing, insulating your household. And so we wanted to make that as easy as possible. And so we created this campaign called Save on Better Appliances, which essentially is sort of a one-stop solution for electrification. So you can sign up for a coaching session where real experts will answer your questions around how to make sure you can take advantage of these tax credits. There's actually a session happening, I think, tonight for folks in Massachusetts. It's sort of Massachusetts specific. And then the last session scheduled right now is for next Wednesday, October 1st. So if you want to make these upgrades and you have questions, highly recommend, in addition to the other resources mentioned today, signing up for that October 1st session. And so this campaign page has links to the electrification planner, a tool to find contractors, and there's sort of a table with the dates you need to know, as well as an FAQ. So again, highly recommend, you go to rewiringamerica.org/save and check out all of these resources. So that's all for me today. Pleasure speaking with you all. And if you have any questions, after today's session is over, you can also follow up with me through email at weil@rewiringamerica.org. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Weil. Thanks so much, Ted. Really appreciate the presentations. Yeah, just a reminder, folks, please put your questions that you have in the Q&A. That's easier for us to track, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. So I think for our Q&A, we're going to have to bounce around a little between some of the nuts and bolts of Ted's presentation and then some of the higher level impacts of electrification in Weil's presentation. So we'll do our best to kind of have different flavored questions for both of you. But Ted, since you went first, why don't we start with you? And I'll start us off with even starting with heat pumps, the whole ducted versus ductless. Now, you mentioned that in your house you have a ducted system. I've at our house and my parents' house, we've done ductless and ducted. I got to say, I'm leaning a little bit more to ductless now because they're more efficient and there's some definite advantages. But could you maybe explore some of the advantages between the two? You did a little bit, but maybe a little more in depth.
Yeah, I mean, you can actually do hybrids of those two. I've got a couple colleagues that did ducted systems on their first 2 stories, and then he had a basement office and an attic space that he did mini splits in. in a very traditional colonial home on the East Coast in Maine. So really depends on your house. What I like to really discuss is like, what do you need for zoning? Do you need your bedrooms different than, say, an office? That starts to lend more towards the mini split and the individual control for individual control of rooms. Do you have space for ducts, right? What's the existing ducting condition if you have a furnace? Like, do I have to have that cost of replacing the entire ducted systems? Um, that is a decision tool that you need to make for each of your homes. And I think that's the challenge for a lot of America is each home has been designed differently, is unique, and you need to start to make those planning decisions based on your own needs. In my home, a very traditional craftsman style home with a lot of wood paneling, it was really hard to do refrigerant lines through the room and things like that. So the mine lended towards a ducted solution. And I see Julie's question here, and her
Perfect.
question was about using mini splits for a tiny 2-bedroom house in San Francisco that is very damp. Julie, sounds like the wall mounted split versions would work well for you. It gets kind of two main zones handled, but you got to figure out if the existing system will lend easy to that. So happy to take that offline with you. And I know you got another question about water heaters, and why don't we take that offline? Get you hooked up with some local contractors because what it costs in San Francisco is probably going to be different than what it be in the Central Valley or perhaps the rest of United States right now. The 120-volt options for water heating are much more available now. There's at least 3 different manufacturers that have those on the market and they're readily available.
Cool. Excited to dive into water heating in a sec. Go ahead, Wesley.
Yeah, we have another question from Drew, and I think this could go to either you, Ted, or Wael, on whether all electrification projects, both from an air emissions perspective and maybe an affordability or a cost savings perspective, should include a solar setup, a home solar setup, and what you all recommend. Is that necessary to really get the savings and the climate benefits, or is it, not necessary and just, yeah, a good thing, but not necessary?
Well, you want to take that one and I'll follow up.
Sure. So it definitely could be a good thing. Installing solar essentially, which, the economics will vary for each household based on, how their utility, how your utility pays you back for any electricity you don't use, as well as your actual electricity rates. But you're essentially paying upfront and then getting discounted electricity for the life of the system. So when we talk about, solar making electrification more affordable, what we mean is that you can sort of imagine effectively what you pay on your electricity is decreasing by, a pretty significant factor. So it can definitely help in terms of, lowering the cost to operate an electric appliance. And if you have an all electric home, then, you're sort of creating the energy that you use for operating those appliances. I don't think it's absolutely necessary. Again, a lot of homes just aren't set up well for solar. If you have a lot of trees over your house and you can't get solar panels, it might still make sense for you to electrify. And while the cost savings from solar can be really valuable, for a lot of households, and we think the majority of households, if something like a heat pump will still save them money. Obviously, it varies depending on your local utility rates, especially for if you're heating with gas today and you'd be switching to a heat pump. But if you currently heat with electric resistance, you're going to save money with a heat pump because you're using, a fraction as much electricity as you were prior. And if you heat with those delivered fuels like fuel oil or propane, you have a really high likelihood of saving money with a heat pump because it's just more efficient and those other fuels are really expensive. So if it works for your household, definitely something to explore, especially if you can get that 30% tax credit before the end of the year. But even if you can't get solar, I don't think that should sort of inhibit anyone from exploring whether electric appliances are the right thing for their home.
I'll just add, in every region of the United States right now, with the efficiencies of heat pumps, you will save emissions on the local grid, whether it's in a very dirty grid in Tennessee versus Pacific Northwest. The efficiencies of heat pumps make that affordable, especially with higher efficient and variable speed heat pumps on the market. They're going to save the grid. The best thing about heat pump water heaters is you can schedule them with solar in California or Florida. You can schedule them with wind in Texas. We can absorb that renewable power with that thermal technology.
One other fun thing I like to do, I'm a heat pump water heater geek, Ted, so you're speaking my language here, but I not only was I trying to schedule my heat pump water heater with solar, but also during the hotter parts of the summer, and I would get some free cooling because my heat pump water heater is in my utility closets. It was like free AC, awesome, love it. Um, Okay, I did want to get to a really, I think, fun and innovative technology that you highlighted, Ted, that's the heat pump dryer. And we've seen some earlier versions of heat pump. I have an earlier version of a heat pump dryer. They're kind of smaller, more compact. They take a little bit longer. But in the last couple of years, as you were saying, Ted, some of these manufacturers have brought these washer dryer combos with a heat pump dryer. I think these are game changing. We actually got one for an apartment that we have. It's 2 hours. You run the cycle. Can you dive a little bit more into that washer dryer combo, Ted, and all the benefits?
Yeah, I really didn't understand that technology until I had one. When designing the ADU for my kid, it's a 100 amp service to this 450 square foot ADU. And it has a 30 amp circuit for the electric dryer and then another 15 amp service for the washing machine. I've completely not used that 30 amps for the electric dryer. I have one unit that plugs into the 120 volt socket. I don't have to use the vent that was designed for that unit because we had venting issues, a very small space venting. It's ventless. The weirdest thing is in my house, I have a drum type washing machine and an electric dryer. That washing machine washes and stays wet. And the mold on the drum machine, I have to fight all the time. The combo washing machine washes and dries, and I never have that same issue. It's just a weird benefit of that technology, but I'm using, a third of the power, I would say even a fifth of the power than my electric dryer and separate washing machine is. Two appliances in my main house versus one appliance in the other. And my kids set it, forget it. They throw their clothes in the washer and let it go, and it's done. So, they don't have to do the switch of wet clothes to the dryer anymore. It just comes out dry.
Yeah, thanks for that. And Lori's asking about brands. The three I've seen, Lori and Ted jump in, are GE has the combo washer dryer, LG, and I think Samsung is the third. Those are the three I'm familiar with.
Yeah. And they've all brought out large capacity versions of those. They're almost like commercial scale sizes now, which is great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed.
So I'm now shopping for those. So if anybody wants to put some links in there, I'm shopping for the main house.
I know, seriously, after we got that for our apartment, we're like, yeah, we got to get this for the main house. But
Yeah.
let's see how we do it.
Yeah, I was wondering if you two could speak a little bit about what options renters might have. I know a lot of these electrification strategies kind of require, fully changing appliances or making pretty involved alterations to the house. So what might a renter be able to do?
We're dealing with a lot of this in New York under the NITRA's efforts for retrofitting buildings, and a lot of those are renters, low income applications. And these gradient type heat pumps that I'll put in the chat are immediately retrofit ready. They go through the window, they're plug-in version. They can do the space conditioning, and you can turn the thermostat off in your residence. And that is a piece of equipment that the renter can purchase and move to another location. And then there's a whole slew of electrification technologies in the kitchen, but well, maybe you want to add anything that you've come across there.
Yeah, I think that the sort of it's something that Kate, you mentioned earlier in terms of induction hobs. If you well, the overall greenhouse gas emissions from a gas stove aren't big. The health impacts are huge, right? As if you if you attended the webinar earlier this week, so you get $100-$200 induction hob. Sort of use that when you're doing quick meals. You don't have to fire up your a gas stove if that's what you have in your apartment, and that's something you can just do on your own. You could also, if you live in a smaller, you maybe say 3 or 4 unit building, talk to your landlord about electrification. When something dies, talk to them about what they plan on replacing it with. This actually just happened to a coworker who lives in a building. The heating and cooling went out, and they asked the tenant for advice on what they should install, and they put them in touch with a contractor to get an incentive from Massachusetts, and the landlord went with a heat pump instead of replacing it with a furnace. So we actually have some resources on our website as well for tips of sort of how to talk to and a helpful guide for like starting that conversation with your landlord if it's something you feel comfortable doing. As well as the sort of the things like Ted mentioned, the window heat pumps, as well as things like induction hobs.
Yeah. I mean, even something as simple as an induction kettle, like for tea and coffee, the pour overs, you can displace a ton of your typical gas load for a gas use on a stove. So those are very simple. I mean, they're $30 and $40 appliances now that can offset a significant amount of just boiling water.
Yeah, and I guess on that note, Ted, if you have the link to that all-in-one toaster microwave that you were talking about earlier, that sounds really cool, like a good resource.
Still shopping for that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, don't stress on that. Well, I have a question for you. You talked, you had so many, your study showed so many health benefits and like monetary benefits of electrification. I'm just wondering, with sometimes the upfront cost of some electrification measures, like a heat pump water heater, being higher than the standard options, have you all given any thought to, is there any way we could, you've quantified the health benefits, but or the actual monetary benefits of these health improvements? Is there any way to capture that into lowering the upfront costs? Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, that's something that I think it definitely would be an interesting option, and is something that we've sort of like talked about but haven't explored fully yet. So I think what you're saying is like, if a heat pump water heater might save, a few $100 over the course of its lifetime, like could we monetize that and you get a discount on the upfront appliance? I think that's something that while there isn't sort of a specific program I was able to find that does this, it's the idea behind I've seen some different hospitals or healthcare systems that are incentivizing things or offering things like induction stoves or induction cooktops because they recognize that there is this very tangible relationship between the appliances you use in your home and the health benefits. And so definitely something we sort of talked about and would be interested in exploring more in the future. And I think others are doing in a sort of like indirect way as well.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for that. Well, Wesley, do we have any time for maybe one last question? Any burning ones you see?
I don't think we have a burning one in the chat. I know Julie was asking about 120 volt water heaters, but I think Ted, you said that would probably be best done offline.
Yeah, and I'll just note the tax credits are going away at the beginning of the year. So if you're planning on doing any electrification right now, it'd be a good time to do that while the tax credits are available. And both of our resources we provided today can get you to the local incentives as well as contractor resources. So just want to thank Rewiring for all the work they've been doing. They've been a fantastic partner in decarbonization, and thank you both for having us here to talk about the decarbonization movement.
So happy to have you both on. That's a great way to leave it. The tax credits are expiring. Good. Start your electrification right now. One other thing I'll highlight is a lot of utilities have great rebates. We just did an article on the heat pump water heater rebates across the country. I just put in the chat. There's rebates for a lot of this equipment, so you can get both the tax credit and rebate. And the time is ripe for Electrify.
And one other thing I want to emphasize, because this is personal to me, this is what I've been trying to do over the last couple of years, is don't feel like you need to do it all at once. You know, each year, pick one thing that makes sense for your house, or if you're a renter, makes sense for your space, and start with that. And then the next year, you know, add a different electrification component. So it's a journey, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly.
Absolutely right. I fully agree with that.
Well said.
Thanks.
Well, thanks so much.
everybody.
Thanks, Weil. Really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. We'll send slides and recording and hope to see you tomorrow for our decarb policy panel. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.